Hello everyone, EagleX from ATX EagleX Gaming here today, and I have our Tier 1 Cross Heart deck profile. If you guys enjoy this content, let me know by dropping a subscription on the channel, liking this video, and commenting down below on what your thoughts are on the deck profile. Cross Heart, for you guys who don't know, is a brand new deck introduced in BT10, utilizing the cross mechanics as a very aggressive style deck that aims to aggro down your opponent through the use of crossing and cheating out Digimon through the effects of some tamers. Let's go ahead and get started talking about the deck. So first, an ideal opener. So the new cross mechanic is a very key part of this deck, as you'll be summoning or crossing Digimon from your hand, and it's a very aggressive playstyle. So similar to Rookie Rush, you're focusing on aggressively swinging into security with any resource you really have. But when your rookies die in this deck, you get to save them as materials underneath of a tamer for a future stack when you cross. From a combination of that BT10 Shoutmon giving rush to a Shoutmon and BT1 tie granting additional checks for a full cross, you can start cleaving through security very quickly, especially in the late game. So your ideal opener, kind of like any deck, you want to have that rookie and raising, ideally a Sparrowmon, as it is a 5k DP body if you have another Cross or Twilight card in play, including Tamers. And then dropping either the Fixer Tie or a Taiki. The reason you would drop a Fixer Tie is so you can drop ideally 2 Taikis in the next turn or 2 Tamers your next turn. Or Taiki on turn 1, because you can honestly play the game with only 1 memory, as a completed X4 cross will only cost 1 memory and a full X5 cross will cost 0 memory. So let's go ahead and start talking about some of these combos you really have for the deck. It's a very linear deck, so ideally you're going to be crossing, using Taiki to enable you to use sources from underneath Tamers. For Shoutmon X4, you need Shoutmon, Ballistamon, Darulamon, and Starmons. And when you read the cross requirements left to right, that is the order top to bottom that you will have to place your sources. So on the left here, I have indicated the ordering of sources you would have for an X4. X5 is very similar, however, you add a Sparrowmon to the very bottom of your stack. But the key thing about Shoutmon X4 is the end of attack effect. You get to basically delete this Digimon to restand a Tamer, which normally is a Taiki. It could be Akari or Zenjiro depending on your scenario and what memory thresholds you need to be met. But then you'll be able to cross again from hand for essentially 1 memory, drawing 2 cards, and then swinging for 2 checks if you have the BT1 tie. X5, very similar for this Digi-Cross mechanic. It could cost 0, and naturally it gets +1 check and is a blocker, so the reboot from Sparrowmon will be useful to block with. But some things I want to keep y'all mindful of. When you're playing a cross deck, like I mentioned before, the cross materials have to be placed in the correct order. If Taiki is played and you are shown 3 non-cross cards and then an X4, you would add it to hand first. But if you're shown 2 X4s or an X4 and an X5, you would add 1 to hand, and then you would have to tuck an X4 or X5 into a source, even though it has no value underneath. Another thing to be mindful of, the on-play of X4. So when you declare you're going to be crossing, you'll be pulling out your sources or cross materials, which could be on the field, it could be from your hand, or it could be from under a Tamer if you have Taiki out. But you get the on-play of drawing 2 after you've done the cross, so you won't be able to dig for a potential piece. And then be very mindful of this. Cost reduction play floodgates will slow this deck down. Psychmon, Solarmon, Chikurimon, these 3 cards are going to be the bane of your existence if you're playing cross. But thankfully this deck has lots of natural answers for removing them. So we're talking about answers, talking about the deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at the deck profile. So deck profile in the big screen here are the cards I have in the main deck. Cards at the bottom are ones I would consider adding in or siding in, depending on what your local's meta looks like. So first of all, Pokemons, your generic draw egg. If you attack with a cross traded Digimon, you draw a card. Surprise, all these rookies have cross. So you got the Sparrow, you got the Shout, which is also a tutoring card. You got the Starmons, which is a draw card if it's in the inheritable. So those are your rookies for this deck. Ballistamon, Darulamon are the 2 level 4 targets you can call with Zenjiro and Akari, respectively. Zenjiro and Akari will see your turn effect if you play a cross Digimon from their on play. So if you use Zenjiro, you play out Ballista, you will be able to gain a memory. Or if you play Akari and you play Darula, you would be able to suspend her and draw a card. And then you have the key cards of X4 and X5. And we're going to be cycling back real quick here, because I forgot to mention it, but Ballistamon is a blocker if you have another cross card in play, I believe is the requirement. And Darulamon will give something minus 3000 DP, which is your first answer to one of those floodgates that prevent you from reducing play costs. Next, we have Death Xmon in this list. He is meant for the mirror match. When your opponent is flooding a large board, you would love to return the flood by removing all bodies on the field, and just getting a free body when you're trying to tempo out is a really big deal. But now we have 3 removal options which I consider very key. First, Crimson Blaze. If your opponent has spammed 2 or more floodgates, or just have 2 or more Digimon on the field, Crimson Blaze is a way to counterplay it. So if you're going against Jesmon, they have a wide board and they ended their turn on a Solarmon, you can Crimson Blaze all their sisters away, deny special summoning for the next turn, and you got rid of the floodgate for pretty cheap costs. Because something to be mindful of, Crimson Blaze has a casting cost, Digimon have a play cost, so the floodgates will not stop the reduction of options as you are casting them, is a way to think about it. Next, we have Fireball. If your opponent has 1 floodgate on the field, using a Fireball is a great way to pop it, otherwise you will draw 2 cards for more consistency. Now for Sunrise Buster, is a really big card in this deck. Sunrise Buster does not only let you cheat out a red or yellow tamer, but it can also help you enable in popping a large body. So if your opponent has a Death X on field maybe, they're swinging security, find a Sunrise, more than likely you'll be popping that Death X every other time, most of the time I should say, especially in the late game. Then we have our Cross Tamers. They're pretty self-explanatory, but BT10 Tie, guys, I will tell you, he is definitely not a bait. He is very big for this deck. Especially if your opponent goes into a Venusmon, they can turn off your deck for a turn. Venusmon is Holy Flame on a Digivolve, and you want to play around that if possible. Tai is also great into security control if they're trying to play a stall play style. But now just talking about some of the cards I have in the little side deck area here. Got Shoutmon King. Shoutmon King's a really cool card. He's applicable as a 1-of normally. And you can get a sneaky rush with the BT10 Shoutmon by putting him underneath. Shoutmon King is a Shoutmon, so you will have rush. So you could pay 3 memory to rush with level 4. Grandel Soul, depending on your meta, you might see Alphamon, you might see Grandis, and this is a great security bomb for those decks. As your options don't really remove Grandis aside from Sunrise Buster or Alphamon. Sunrise Buster is your only real out for big stacks, and this could just be an alternative. Hero of the Sky is the cross option. It's flexible, it's a great thing to mess around with. I've not found it super useful in my testing, but it's something I would consider if a great reason was really brought up for it. You got the Blue Flare Tamer, Christopher in Japan, or Kiriha. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name. He's like a Tai, except he enables you to use sources from your tamers, like Taiki. And then Tai and Kari, great way to enable that your Digimon will live when swinging into security, and could potentially gain you more memory in the late game. This is more relevant if you expect to see your opponents play decks that comprise of higher DP Digimon that effectively 10,000 DP wouldn't be enough for. It also does enable Sunrise off of one tamer. It's just something to be mindful of. But just to kind of wrap up this profile, the Cross mechanic puts a very aggressive rush style deck together in the form of Cross Art here. Using the mechanic, the game's added a new way to summon rush targets from your hand that can perform multiple checks in loop extra rushing targets. So even if you go into a very late game state against a deck like Security Control, the value of saving materials and BT10 tie can definitely help you overcome it, as you will have multiple checks, and if you do die, you can save those materials and go into your next crossing stack right away. If you guys enjoy this content, let me know in the comments down below. With that being said, take care, y'all, and have a nice one.